Hi everyone, we continue to assemble our Ramp Buggy from GTA 5. In the last part we put the frame on wheels and made the steering. In this part the engine and the control gear will be installed on the ramp, and then there goes the first exit. First thing to do is to bring the engine, which has been laid in the corner of the workshop for about a year and waited for its hour. This is 1.7 liters for 85 horsepower assembled together with the gearbox removed from Moskvich. The winch will help to unload it. While the engine installation, some tubes will interfere, they had to be cut off. Now we can try on the engine in the engine area. It's rather big and the engine feels free in it. The right drive will certainly remain native, but the left one needs to be trimmed. The engine support cushions will stand exactly on these protrusions in the frame. In this case we'll make a start from the drives since the wheels cannot be moved. The engine itself will move a little into the cabin due to the length of the whole construction. In order your elbows cannot wind round the runner, it's always possible to weld the motor shield. And there is enough space for passengers in the cabin for comfortable sitting. Further, the back of the chairs will be thinner, but we can leave these chairs too. Principally the position of the engine is clear, and it can be attached to the frame through the cushions. They are 2 pieces in total. The original cushions were so long to wait, and I acquired such cushions from another car. They practically approached the holes. Cushion brackets will be made of 10 mm slab. After fitting and aligning the engine, they should be welded to the frame. The third stop of powertrain is located on the tail of the gearbox. We welded tubes and fixators for it. Now we can lower the engine and remove the slings. The oil filter was slightly damaged during the installation, but it still needs to be changed together with the oil. Now we need to start the engine. Who knows what could happen to it in a year of downtime. To check it, we're going to install all the electronics in it. Since it's carburetor, there's not much of it. Here's the ignition coil and the igniter. All other furniture is already in the engine. I checked with the scheme, connected all the components. Seems like everything is connected according to the scheme. The starter is spinning. Now I want to check the spark, as I've done my wiring by getting rid of the excess of wires. The spark appeared, so we can try and start the engine. There were vibrations at a cold motor, but after some heating it began to work stably. It's again just salient characteristic of carburetor engine. After making sure everything is working, we can go to the next step, the drives exactly. It turned out successfully that the right drive fitted clean in size, but the left should be shortened a bit. We need to cut the drive and determine its length in place. Meanwhile, we decided not to strengthen the weld seam with halves of pipe. We need to see how it will behave during the movement. I immediately checked the drives, lifted the buggy, and started the engine in gear. Everything is okay. The drives are working and are not clamped in all suspension positions. There goes the control gear. Started with pedals. We saved our time and took them from the donor as well. While the fitting, it turned out that one of the frame pipes would interfere with the pedals. I already told in the first part that the frame wasn't worth strengthening so far. The reinforcement may interfere with further arrangement of the machine units and assemblies. I had to cut the pipe, and in order the frame couldn't become suddenly distorted, I welded a couple of stops. Now nothing interferes with pedal assembly, and it's possible to make the attachment brackets for it. The third attachment will be a stop. As the clutch and the brake pedals are rigid, you need to apply some force to press them. Such pedal's length is too long, so we need to shorten it by at least a half. Now it's correct. Leaping ahead, I'm gonna say that it's rather comfortable to press them, and there's no need for any excessive efforts. The throttle pedal is homemade. A pin with a connecting nut plays a role of the hinge. It needs a cable release at least 3 meters long. I tried to take the speedometer cable and convert it into a gas cable for buggy. We need to change the cable itself. To attach it, we need to make a hole. In order it wouldn't fray through the pipe, I took a connector from the standard gas cable. Joined it to the throttle pedal. After checking, it turned out that the speedometer guide cable was compressed and didn't allow the flap to work correctly even with several springs. The solution was found later. I installed a brake cable from a snowmobile. It fitted well and the flap was working properly with it. Next in the list is the gear shifting. Started with a latch gear that is situated on the tail of the gearbox. I've already done this with buggy from PUBG, but this time I wanted to make it hidden so that it wouldn't extend from the frame. For this purpose, we decided to invent a new mechanism. It'll look like the old one, but there'll be one more L-shaped bracket that will move the hinges from the stabilizer struts. In order the shank can move forward and backward, we'll need one rack. To move to the right and left, another one. It was immediately connected to the shift rod. Now we need to make the shank turn. For this purpose, we welded a bracket and a second rack. But then there appeared one problem. According to such construction, it's just impossible to rotate the shank. The pin on which the connecting nut is located is fixed, and it doesn't allow to turn the whole construction. It often happens in such kind of work. Everything works perfectly in your head, but in fact it turns out differently. But there's always a fallback tested position. We made the same mechanism as in Buggy from PUBG. The protruding parts can be closed with a stop signal or a decorative license plate. In order the pull rods don't spring, it's necessary to weld the stiffening ribs to them. Then we need to make a clutch. It'll be hydraulic. For this purpose I acquired new spare parts, namely the master cylinder which stands near the pedal, and the working cylinder located near the gearbox. We need to make a platform behind the clutch pedal for the master cylinder. The Lewis bolt with a ring welded onto it will play a role of the rod. I made a bracket for the working cylinder and placed it on the gearbox. The cylinders will be connected with a brake main from some classic model of car. For this purpose we need to remove the connecting pipes from the standard clutch tube to the brake tube. There's only left to expand the tube. I'll make this with a special clamp. Then I connected two cylinders between each other. The fluid reservoir will be located on the instrument panel. After filling the liquid, the air was driven out of the main. We got a very soft, smooth clutch. The last thing is the brakes. As there remained the donor's brake booster, we decided to install it. We need to make a separate attachment for it and cut out a segment for the rod in the slab. The pedal is connected, there's left to connect the calipers with the cylinder through the brake tubes. The front calipers were connected without any problem, but I had to tinker away with the rear ones. There are two hoses that come out of caliper for each piston. We connected them into one main line through a T-joint. One of the pistons can be further used as a hydraulic handbrake. These twin tubes were later connected through the T-joint to the brake cylinder. Then the fluid was poured and the brakes were pumped. We got 3 piston calipers in front and 2 piston calipers at rear. The brakes are ready and it's time to already start the engine and try to drive. Still there are few subjects left. It's the engine cooling and a gas tank. The radiator was placed above the gearbox. It'll be attached with its upper part to the crossbar. In order it couldn't hang, we made another bracket from below. The expansion tank just got into this place. The standard rubber hoses didn't fit, they were replaced by silicone tubes. Now we can pour Tosol cooling agent in and move to the gas tank. Ironically, the role of the gas tank will play a fire extinguisher. We only need to weld the tank filler to it. It'll be right above the carburetor as in the game model of the Ramp Buggy. All the electronics will be above the engine and the battery behind the seat. We only need to screw the air filter and can start the engine. Then the air should be ejected from the cooling system. Till now the wire closed by the frame will serve as the ignition key. After the engine warm-up we began to drive out air from the tubes. We took them off in turn, filled them with antifreeze, but couldn't achieve normal liquid circulation. The radiator seemed to be warmed up, but the fan didn't turn on and the tow-sole boiled. We decided to install an additional T-joint near the radiator to release those air plugs through it. Also, the expansion tank was removed higher. Ultimately we managed to defeat the air plug and force the fan to turn on while antifreeze warming. This means we can try to go out the workshop, check the suspension, the traction and the brakes. The front suspension was lifted to the uppermost position. This time we just drove around the workshop territory. According to First Sensations, this is a completely civil vehicle. It's very comfortable to control. Everything is pressed without any effort. The large size isn't practically felt. The angle of rotation is also not large. The only thing we forgot was to install the front shock absorbers as the levers hit the frame on irregularities. So far there's enough engine power, but I want to put at least 200 horsepower in such buggy. Who knows, maybe one day such engine will turn up. The brakes haven't been adjusted yet, and the only front axle grasped. In general, the first ride passed with no incident. It seems that we've tried everything. There are few cases about the front suspension. The upper ball sockets became untwisted, thus there's a different wheel camber. And as for the first ride, everything is really fine. At this point the video comes to its end. If you liked it, please share this video, put your thumbs up and leave a comment. See you in the next video, in which we'll most likely try to turn over some car.